welcome back to part 2 of our depressing warehouse simulator. Ultimately what we're doing here is adding a sound effect and then adding game to our game. Currently we've got no gameplay, so what we're going to do is make it so we gain points if you put the socket, if you put the cardboard box into a socket. Take points away if you take it out of the socket, because we don't want the player to be able to exploit by taking it out of the socket and putting it back in, constantly gaining points. We're going to take points away. Making the boxes spawn in based on a timer and displaying the current number of points via some kind of user interface on screen, and then letting you guys knock yourselves out and have fun to make it look really dispiriting. That's what we're going to try and do today. Firstly, sound effects. I've got a series of sound effects which I'll put probably on the X drive. I'll tell you in lesson, but basically I've got some sound effects that we're going to use. I've downloaded them from freesound.org. And this is the sound effect that I'm interested in. So it's Cardboard Impact 03. This is what it sounds like. What we're going to do is make that sound effect happen when the socket takes place. So I've already taken a download of that. That's already in my downloads folder. If I go into my downloads folder, we can see that's where it is. So I'm going to just drag that into the asset space. You can do the same. If you get the opportunity, create an account to freesound. It's so good. It's people just recording sound effects, and you can download them for free. It's fantastic. And you can of course add to it as well. Let me show you how easy it is to make that sound effect play when something goes into the socket. I'm just going to minimise all of this mess because it's looking really, really busy here. So I'm just going to minimise the XR interaction setup, and suddenly it's all tidy. I'm going to tell the socket interactor, hey, socket interactor, interactor events. It's a little drop down right at the bottom, there's an arrow. What do we want to have happen when something is socketed, which is called selected in this case? Click the plus. What do we want to have happen? Now at the minute there is no sound effect on here that can play, so what we need to say is add a component. This is going to be an audio source, so there's now a sound emitter on this object, and it's currently emitting no audio clip, no sound. What I'm going to do is drag that audio clip into there. And we absolutely don't want it to play on a wake. We don't want it to play automatically. That doesn't make sense. Great for background music, doesn't make any sense in this instance. And what you also want to do is to change the spatial blend from 2D all the way to 3D. What that does, if it's set to 2D, you'll hear the same volume no matter how far away you are. With 3D, you'll hear it'll be louder the closer that you are. The one thing that's weird by default is you can hear it from half a kilometre away, so 500 metres. That's bonkers. We're going to change it to something like 10 metres. And then you see this little curve. The weird thing I don't understand about logarithmic roll-off is it will always be that loud no matter how far away you are. So I'm going to click the drop down for logarithmic roll-off and change it to linear. Basically now, really loud if you're really close, basically silent if you're 10 metres away. That's the behaviour that I'm looking for. By default, that shouldn't play now. I shouldn't hear that sound effect. But what I now want to do is with my selected, where it's looking for the object, I'm going to drag the audio source into there. It's looking for the socket interactor, and then the function, I want the audio source, and now we can choose what we want. Really easy. I want to tell the audio source to play, or more accurately I can do play one shot, which I think will only play once, but I'm just going to go with play. I haven't tested this, let's see how this works. So I'm telling the audio clip to play.
I really hope I'm recording my screen sound effects.
There you go. Every time it sockets in,
plays the sound effects.
Which is
nice.
nice. Absolutely worth spending that little bit of time to make a sound effect happen. Good user experience. Easy as that. You should also at this stage have noticed that you've got the haptic feedback, so the vibration coming through the controllers when you're interacting with things. If you haven't noticed, that's all pre-set up, and while we're here, let's just quickly talk about that, just because, why not? If I look at the left and right controller, you'll notice that you've got these settings. Where they are. Maybe it's in the individual very interactive. Just showing you this while we're here. You've got your interactive filters, audio events, and haptic event. I don't need you to change this, but just be aware that under the different types of interactor for each controller, you can change the intensity, the duration of the vibration that takes place. It's there. Didn't plan on teaching it, but let's not turn down that opportunity. The next step is adding points. We've got about 20 minutes left. Let's see if we can get through all of this in 20 minutes or so. When we looked at our first person game, very start of the year, we had a game controller, a game manager. This job was to keep a record of things. We're going to do exactly the same thing here. Right click anywhere in the grey hierarchy space, create an empty game object. We're going to give this a name of game controller, and we're also going to give it a tag. Choose the drop down of game controller. It's a pre-made tag, we may as well use it. It will have put it in the middle of your view, which isn't necessarily the middle of the world. So just right click on transform, reset it, so you can find this thing later should you ever need to. The job of game controller is to hold a script, and that script will be able to hook into our interactions and make our score go up and down. So let's add a component, and this is going to be a new thing called, let's call it game controller. Game controller, notice, has to start with capital G, capital C, no spaces please. That's a new script which is called game controller. Remember, if you haven't put this in your source and repos folder, you're about to find out why that's important, because it won't do the autocomplete for you and your code will be unhappy. So, if we double click on game controller, or you can double click over here for it, that will open in Visual Studio. This script will have 3 jobs: to tell us our starting number of points, to make our points go up when a cardboard box is socketed, to make our points go down when one is removed. So we don't need the start or the update functions, just delete them, get rid of them. The first thing we need to record is a publicly visible whole number, which is called an integer, and that's going to be called points. The number of points that are our initial number is 0. So what we're doing here is declaring this variable by giving it a name and giving it an initial value, which is otherwise known as initializing it. So we're giving it that initial value of 0. At the end of the line, after the semicolon, I'm going to press enter, and now we're going to start creating functions we can hook into. This, our first function, well, both of them are going to be public again, so every other script can see it. It's going to be void, so it will return nothing. That void means return type. We're not really returning anything at this stage. And then we're going to need to give it a name. I'm going to call it add points, if I can spell point. Open and close regular brackets. This is where things get interesting, because in order for our interactions to work with this, I don't need you to minimize it, I'm just going to so I can show you something. If I look at the socket interactor, which is where this code is going to go, under the select keyword, we've got this parameter here. It's called an argument, and it's called select enter event args. And notice how the exit one is different. Select exit event args. That is the piece of information that gets passed around when we socket something or we take something out of the socket. So we can use that data information, and in this case we actually need to in order to get this to work. So we are going to use select enter event args. The word args in this case is short for arguments. It's information getting passed in, and it will tell us this uses the interaction toolkit. Would you like me to import it as well? If I click on that or press enter, it will also import that. If it hasn't imported it for you, or you couldn't see that, you need to type that on line 4, and that's what you need. Select enter event args is the type of data that's being recorded. Then we need to give it a temporary name, which I'm going to call data, which this function can use. Open and close regular brackets, press enter, and now we can say what should happen when we get some points. I don't know. The number of points should go up, semicolon. Easy as that. So the number of points will go up by 1, that's what plus plus is doing, and the semicolon says that we're done. I've saved it with a control and an S. If everything's okay with your code, what we can now do is also, when we're selecting, we're going to add another event. It's going to do two things. It's going to play the sound effect, and it's also going to do something else. The something else is to tell the game controller, so I'm going to drag the game controller into the non-object, and then we can get it to call the game controller script, and we're looking for add points. And we won't find it in this bottom bit because it's an example of a dynamically changing variable, because it's passing in this select enter event args data. So it lives at the top, we're going to add points, it's special, it's dynamic. So to test this, you can see the game controller on the right hand side of the screen.
I currently can't in headset. Hopefully, as I socket this in, the number should go up when I let go. And put it back in. I should have 2 points. I should have 3 points. I should have 4 points.
Thankfully, that's what I got. Currently, that is exploitable, obviously, because the player can just take it out and put it back in. So what we're now going to do is make it so when we come out of the socket, we're going to lose some points. It's going to be exactly the same thing. The only difference is we're not going to be using select enter event args, we're going to be using select exit event args. The easiest way to do this, because I encourage you guys to be lazy, I'll be honest, I'm going to select all of those lines of code, all the way from that, including the bottom squiggly bracket, copy, click at the end of the squiggly bracket, press enter to give yourself a bit of space, Control V to paste it in, and it's now telling me we can't have another function called add points because we've already got one. You can't, it's already defined, can't call it the same thing. So let's call this remove points. Obviously points will go down, so points minus minus, but we can't use this select enter event args because this isn't going to happen when we enter it, it's going to happen when we exit it instead. We can still use this temporary name called data because they're different, because it only exists for the length of that block of code. So you can use the same name here, but we couldn't have used it the same name here. I'm going to save that, and now we should be able to hook in the same thing. When we exit it, we're going to use our game controller object. We're going to find the game controller script, and now you'll find remove points is a dynamic select exit event args. While we're here, I'm also going to make it play the same sound effect when we remove it, using the exact same techniques we did before. Why not? You'll notice that the order doesn't matter, but you can change the order if you want to. You can drag things up and down. Doesn't matter at all. So now we expect to be gaining points, and we expect to be losing points.
Should have a point. Should have 0 points. Should have a point. Should have 0 points. There we go.
Of course, we can't see that in a minute, but you can see I've got 1 point. As a player, I can't see that information right now. It's not on the game anywhere. I can't see it. It's not very good. So we've added points. We have removed points. And we're going to make boxes spawn in based on a timer. Do you know what? I'm going to change my planning here. I'm going to do that one next. That'll confuse my planning in a few minutes. We're going to get it to display the current number of points via the user interface first. Again, probably the second most useful thing is conveying information to the player. This is called UX, user experience. So we're now going to make another empty game object. So I'm going to create an empty game object. I'm going to call this UI for user interface, and I'm going to reset its position. We'll need to change it in a minute, but we'll sort that in a moment. What we are now going to do with our UI is we're going to go to game object, XR, and we're going to create a UI may have got this wrong. I'm going to create a UI canvas. It will make a new object. That's fine. I can scrap that thing called UI. I didn't need it. A canvas, if you look around, you've now got this huge white rectangle. And I mean huge white rectangle. Unlike when we did this before and it was absolutely monstrous, this instead is a world space canvas. So this little drop down says world space. What this means is this canvas is a physical object in the physical world. So if I put it over there, I'm just going to move it up and move it up and move it up. There you go, big rectangle. If I right click on the canvas and create a new piece of UI, I'm going to create a piece of Text Mesh Pro. Notice this is really important, you have to right click on the canvas. UI, Text Mesh Pro, you may have to import Text Mesh Pro. Visual Studio, what are you doing? And you can close that down. You'll notice you've got this big slab of text, which is way too big. I'm going to decrease its font size. And I'm also going to center align it, because that's just tidier. You can still use this tool here, the Rect tool, if you want to move everything around. Quick word about UI while we're here. This yellow space and the squares are basically the devil. Ignore them, they don't exist. You don't want to touch them, because all they do is change the margin. We don't want the margin. We want to change the blue ones at the corner. And this works a bit like a text box. You can line it up and it's far prettier. Currently, if I go into the game, I should see new text in huge letters directly in front of me. Is that what I see? All hail new text. Obviously that's too big. So I'm going to grab the canvas, I'm going to use the scale tool, scale it down, scale it down, scale it down. And this is just an object in the world, so move it around. We're going to put it at the back over here. Probably still too big. Shrink it down a bit, don't really matter. Now that will be a much more manageable size. You can see, on screen, but at eye level. You can imagine in a game that being on a big TV screen or that being on a billboard or something. At the minute it's just hovering for no reason. What we're now going to do though is to tell our game controller to also have a slot for some Text Mesh Pro, which is going to be this, and say every time the point goes up and down, also, make this say your current number of points. That makes sense. Again, this is really easy. I'm opening the game controller script. Again, if you've got it closed down, you can find it there, game controller script. But after our points, at the end of the line, I'm going to press enter, and now we would like a public Text Mesh Pro U GUI. Stupidly long name. Text Mesh Pro U GUI. For those of you who haven't put this in the source and repos folder and are now starting to feel a bit daft, you will also need to be using Text Mesh Pro. So in Let's Go line 3, it's put it on using TM Pro. Notice the capital T, M and P. So we're going to be using Text Mesh Pro U GUI, and we're going to give this a name, something like points output, semicolon. All I'm now going to do is take points output, copy that piece of text, and when our points go up, at the end of that line, I'm going to press enter, paste it in, or you could write point output if you really wanted to. And I'm going to say, I want the point output text, so dot text, to equal, well, the number of points that we've got, please. Okay, and that will set it to that. If I did semicolon, this will fail. Points is a number, it's a whole number, whereas text has to be text. So we need to convert this to a string of characters first. Really easy way of doing that. You take points dot toString. For some reason that put it on the wrong line, but dot toString, open and close regular brackets. There you go. Exact same line of code, copy, when points go down, enter, paste. So whenever the points go up, our points increase, and then we update the score on the screen to actually see what it is. And then we'll do that every time we remove the points as well. Saving it, going back to Unity, and if I click on the game controller, there's now a slot for what piece of text should I change. Well, I would like this piece of text to change, please. If I press play, it should say new text until we go and get some points. New text, new text.
And letting go. We've got 1, we've got 0, we've got 1, we've got 0.
Now that's all well and good, but I want to do one more thing. Do you know what? Changed my mind. Because I'm in charge and can do this kind of stuff, I'm changing my mind. We're going to be making the boxes disappear instead. We're not going to do spawn points today. We'll save that for the lesson. But what I now want it to do is when the box goes in the socket, it will despawn. It will basically disappear. I think that's more useful for this lesson. The idea we could use the same socket interactor. Something could go into it, then another thing can go into it, and I think that's a more useful thing to demonstrate in a minute. So, really easy to do because we've already basically written what we need. In the game controller, whenever we add points, we're now going to do something else. Do you know that data that currently sits there and isn't doing anything? That's data about the select enter event args or the removed. So what I now want to do is to hook into that data that we've already got. And I want information about the interaction that's just taking place. I can get information about the interactor object. I can get information about the interactable. And it gets complicated to explain the difference, but basically anything you can grab is an interactable. XR grab interactable. Yes, so anything that is grabbable is an interactable. Anything that is like your socket interactor is an interactor. So yeah, what I want to do is I want to delete the interactable. So from there I can get the interactor object. I've got myself confused here. XR grab interactable. Yes, I want the interactable. Data.interactable object. And from that I want to get the transform information about the interactable, so the cardboard box, and I want to get its game object. So I've now got all the information I need to destroy it. So I want to destroy DSTROY, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon, say that we're done. Now as something socket into it, points will go up, the number of points we see on score will go up, and we will destroy the box. Now, suddenly our code for being able to go up
by more than one suddenly makes sense. So picking up our cardboard box, in the socket, gone. Next thing. Huh.
Didn't expect that. Didn't expect that. Why is points not going up? Feel free to fast forward to the bit of the tutorial when I figure this out. I don't understand that. It's firing that bit of code. Why is it not firing that bit of code? Maybe I've got to do it after I destroy it. to how I fixed it or something like that. But basically that confused me a little bit. All that we wanted to finish off now with our tutorial, I'll leave that as a red, we'll come back to that one. Adding customised detail to the environment. This is where you can have some fun. If you've got a couple of minutes left of your time on the headset, have some fun in terms of customising it, thinking what assets you can add from the asset store. Can you make a bin for it to actually go into, as opposed to just an invisible space at the end there? What I would like to see is something that represents a large storage bin. You could make one out of simple boxes, or you could pull an asset from the asset store. Something like a big warehousey type bin for the boxes to go into was what I was expecting. I'll try and figure this out, and once I've figured it out I might do a quick follow-up video, or I might just pin a comment as to what I'm doing that's daft. Thank you very much all, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.